Around 2 a.m. on January 31, 1986, brothers Harry and Mike Ditchburn were awakened by someone calling out to them at their lonely Vermont farmhouse. This wasn't totally uncommon. They had frequently assisted stranded drivers over the years. But this time seemed different. The man outside called Harry's name, but neither brother recognized the voice. When they stated they didn't have any gas, the man started beating on the door. Mike went to investigate and was met by two mystery figures who attempted to force their way inside. One of them struck Mike in the face without saying a word. Harry appeared shortly later and was knocked out with his own cattle prod. Mike attempted to fight back, but was swiftly overwhelmed and left injured. The brothers were known to avoid banks and were suspected to retain considerable sums of money at home. That night, Harry supposedly had around $7,000 in $100 bills, which the intruders grabbed before departing. Harry remained unconscious, and after more than 3 hours, Mike crawled to their truck and drove half a mile to a neighbor's house for assistance, an effort that most likely saved both of them. Authorities came with little leads. However, the suspects made a mistake. Shortly after the crime, two persons used the stolen money to purchase a car in nearby Enosburg. Despite paying in cash, the dealership staff were doubtful, particularly given the strong odor of barnyard on the money. Local businesses were urged to be aware of substantial cash transactions involving $100 bills that had a peculiar odor. The dealership reported the sale, prompting the arrest and eventual conviction of Darrell Clark, 39, and Louis Gilbo, 33, within 18 months. The Ditchburn brothers never totally recovered. They eventually entered a long-term care facility. Mike died in 1991, followed by Harry in 1999. Their residence remained basically unchanged for years until March 20, 2004, when a Vermont state trooper went to a complaint and discovered an automobile backed into the side of the structure, smashing with the external wall. That automobile belonged to Brianna Maitland, a young woman who went missing on the same day it was recovered. Before investigating more into her disappearance, the trooper saw the strange scene: a green 1985 Oldsmobile 88 parked awkwardly off Vermont Route 118, as if it had reversed into the building from the incorrect direction. While it wasn't uncommon for cars to drift off the road at that curve, this particular position was highly remarkable. Outside the car, loose change, a necklace, and a lime wedge had been left on the trunk. The automobile was unlocked. There were takeout containers, non-perishable food, and a few uncashed paychecks from the Black Lantern Inn, a neighboring Montgomery bar and restaurant. The trooper who discovered Brianna's abandoned automobile phoned a nearby auto shop, Lutzer's Automotive, to have it towed. He then drove over to inquire about the vehicle and its owner, who was identified as **Brianna Maitland ** on the paperwork. However, when he got to the Black Lantern Inn, where Brianna worked, he discovered it was closed. Instead of waiting for it to reopen or reporting the peculiar conditions for further inquiry, he abandoned the site right immediately. This omission would have severe repercussions, straining the relationship between the Vermont State Police and Brianna's family when they arrived at the St. Albans barracks many days later. However, there was a legitimate justification for the delay in filing the missing person report on March 23. Brianna had been living away from home for a while when she disappeared. She was staying with a friend, Gillian Stout, in Sheldon, which is approximately 20 miles west of Montgomery and 12 miles southwest of her parents' house in East Franklin. Brianna desired some freedom and to be in a place where she might meet people her age, as her area was quite remote with no social and career opportunities. Despite living away from home, Brianna maintained a tight contact with both of her parents, communicating with them on a daily basis, despite the fact that she did not have a cell phone. She frequently returned home for visits. When Brianna went gone, Gillian Stout, a friend she was staying with, observed nothing strange. She was out of town from the evening of March 20th to March 22nd. Gillian last saw Brianna on March 19th, while she was still sleeping. Brianna was set to take her JADE exam that day. Her mother, Kelly, drove her to the exam at about 10 a.m. After that, they went shopping together, and Kelly saw Brianna appeared angry at one point. Brianna went outdoors for a few minutes and returned, looking worried. Kelly later reflected on this event and wondered what had transpired while Brianna was outdoors. Brianna didn't have a cell phone, so it's unlikely she received a call. Kelly believed Brianna walked outside to smoke to avoid getting in trouble. Kelly dropped Brianna off at Jillian's apartment at 2:45 p.m. that day. Brianna departed for work before Jillian arrived home from school. She left a note explaining that she would be working late and gave the Black Lantern Inn's phone number in case Jillian wanted to reach her. Jillian had no cause to call, so she departed later that day to spend the weekend with her sister in St. Albans. When she came on the 22nd, she realized the message was still there, but Brianna was nowhere to be seen. Concerned, Jillian called the Maitlands the next day, presuming Brianna had spent the weekend with her family. However, after the Maitlands hadn't heard from Brianna, they started calling friends and acquaintances to see where she was. When the search found no results, Brianna's father, Bruce Maitland, phoned the Vermont State Police and reported her and her car missing. He was informed that an all-points bulletin, APB, would be issued for Brianna and her green 1985 Oldsmobile. At the time, law enforcement had access to practically all of the information, except the most important: Brianna Maitland owned the abandoned car. Because the responding officer hadn't made a report, no one in law enforcement was aware of the relationship. Without Brianna's parents' insistence, it's unclear how long officials would have disregarded this detail. Bruce and Kelly Maitland took matters into their own hands. They visited the state police barracks, where an anonymous trooper showed them images of a 1985 Oldsmobile 88 that had been towed on March 20th. It quickly became clear that the officer had failed to report the car's discovery or link it to Brianna's missing person alert. To make matters worse, Bruce learned that the trunk had not been inspected before the vehicle was towed. It sat in a lot, unexamined, for 5 days. When the Maitlands arrived at the towing yard, the issues persisted. Bruce asked the trooper if he had the car keys. The cop initially said yes, but then realized he hadn't. In truth, no keys were discovered at the site, if they were even looked for. The officer had to manually disconnect the transmission linkage in order to have the vehicle towed. With few other options, Bruce asked for a crowbar to open the trunk. Finally, someone made steps that resembled an investigation. Thankfully, Brianna was not inside. That gave some hope, but it also revealed that police had no idea where she was. On March 26, with no leads, Vermont State Police launched a search of the area surrounding the Ditchburn farmhouse. K-9 units and a Vermont National Guard helicopter assisted. This was the second time Bruce Maitland and Brianna's older brother, Waylon, had searched the area. The probe did not appear to have a great sense of urgency. Their tardiness in following up at Brianna's employment demonstrated this. 9 days following her disappearance, Bruce paid a visit to the Black Lantern Inn to inquire about her. The inn's personnel was helpful. Brianna apparently finished her shift about 11:20 p.m. on March 19. She said that she had to get up early for another job in St. Albans, and then drove away without issue. That was the last time she was seen. What happened between her departure from the inn and the following afternoon? Investigators were eventually able to recreate a broad timeline, but it only added to the mystery. The responding officer found the car about 1:15 p.m. on March 20th, but others had seen it earlier. Around 8 a.m., a group of 3 young people, 2 men and 1 woman, walked by the Ditchburn residence on their way to Jai Peak. They noticed something peculiar about the scene and decided to explore. They also took images, which were later widely spread in web publications about the murder. Their photographs contained more detail than the responding officer's single image. In reality, the car was towed before crime scene investigators could examine it, which may have contaminated a potential murder scene. The group helped determine important details, such as the location of a coffee cup on the ground and the approximate 5-foot distance between it and a nearby pile of change, observations that were never properly documented by the first officer on scene. However, they were not the first to notice the car. According to Overacker, several people witnessed Brianna's car backing into the old Ditchburn house shortly after midnight on March 20th. Other drivers said that their headlights and turn signals were still on. The lights were turned off around 8 a.m. when the group snapped photographs. By 1:15 p.m., when the responding trooper arrived, the situation had altered again. 4 further witnesses would testify. They included a man on his way to visit family, a couple, and, most importantly, someone who knew Brianna directly. The 4th witness, a young man who claimed to have seen the car at 4:30 a.m., first stated that he did not alert the police because he was coming from a party in Canada and had been drinking. Concerned about a probable Dewey penalty, he acknowledged to turning off the headlights and signal, closing the car doors, and driving away without reporting what he saw. That young man was James, Brianna's on and off boyfriend. His story altered numerous times based on where he had been and when he saw the vehicle. Despite these contradictions and his close personal relationship with Brianna, there appeared to be little scrutiny into his alleged involvement in her abduction. There should have been. There are vital details to know about Brianna Maitland, some positive, some distressing, but all relevant to understanding the circumstances surrounding her kidnapping. Brianna was not your usual, troubled teen, despite being labeled as such by multiple sources. She was quite intelligent. Her parents, Bruce and Kelly, were both college graduates who had moved from the more populated town of Honeybrook, Pennsylvania, to live a quieter life in rural Vermont. To be fair, Honeybrook isn't exactly a thriving metropolis, but they left small-town Pennsylvania for a more remote life in Vermont. Brianna was born in October 1986, when her parents were living in their first Vermont farmhouse. Later, they relocated to a 60-acre farm near the Canadian border, rather than the neighboring American villages of Franklin and Berkshire. She spent a large portion of her youth there, gaining not only an appreciation for nature but also a diverse set of abilities and intellectual potential. Kelly attended public education until 3rd grade, when concerns about a mentally abusive teacher prompted her to homeschool for several years. Brianna finally went back to public school to finish middle school. During her homeschooling years, she developed an enthusiastic reading habit and a strong appreciation for classic literature. She frequently referenced books that she felt reflected her own experiences. When she wasn't reading or studying, she enjoyed being outside, camping on her family's property, tracking deer with her father and brother, or canoeing through the wilderness areas of New York and Maine. Greg Overacker, the Maitland family's private investigator and author of The Hunt for Brianna Maitland, described Brianna as a capable and resilient young woman. Both Overacker and her father talked highly of her strong personality. She was a skilled skeet shooter with jiu-jitsu training, making her more than capable of self-defense if needed. Brianna grew up in a rather isolated setting, despite her many abilities. Her family lived a mile down a lonely lane in rural Vermont, with few neighbors and few possibilities for social engagement. As she grew older, she struggled with isolation. Brianna decided to move out with friends in October 2003, when she was 17 years old. Her parents were concerned, but they supported her decision, believing she would soon return home. While the move gave her a sense of independence, it also created instability in her life. Brianna traveled frequently during the next few months, staying with friends, boyfriends, and relatives. According to Overacker, her most recent boyfriend, referred to as James, in The Hunt for Brianna Maitland, had known Brianna since childhood. She became close to his sister and moved in with their family in late 2003. After their split in mid-February 2004, Brianna moved in with her friend Gillian Stout. The numerous changes in her living situation may have increased her stress and contributed to her disappearance. At the time, rural Vermont was experiencing a growing drug epidemic. Dealers from New York, Albany, and Boston delivered crack cocaine and other drugs to tiny villages. These perpetrators usually targeted young people by going to local hangouts including schools, movie theaters, and restaurants. The Vermont State Police, with limited resources spread across a vast area, struggled to contain the situation. Brianna, like many other teens in the area, used drugs recreationally at parties. While she wasn't a frequent attendee, parties had become an important part of her social life due to a lack of other entertainment options, and this exposure could have put her in danger. Brianna had been into a physical altercation at one of these events less than a month before disappearing. The confrontation was reportedly with a female named Key, and the disagreement was allegedly about a boy. According to Overacker, Brianna was involved with Key's boyfriend, which most likely contributed to the tension. According to witnesses, Key spent the whole of the evening trying to provoke Brianna into a fight. Despite repeated attempts to calm the situation, Brianna eventually left the party and sat in the passenger seat of James' car, implying a reconciliation between the two. Around 2 a.m., Key allegedly approached the vehicle and confronted Brianna. Brianna rolled down the window, and Key struck her twice in the face. Despite her self-defense training, Brianna did not fight back. She opted to flee the area on foot. A few minutes later, a group of friends picked her up. At the time, she lived with James' grandparents. Her friends worked with James' sister to get Brianna home, where they assisted her in cleaning up and relaxing. The next day, Brianna contacted her parents to explain what had happened and to request that they take her to the hospital. Later, Shauna LaBelle, one of Overacker's few fully recognized acquaintances, drove her to St. Albans to report the incident and file charges. This is an important problem that deserves more attention than it currently receives. When Brianna went missing on March 20, the assault case stalled in court. Key had the right to confront her accuser, but because Brianna was gone and considered to be in danger, the matter could not be pursued. Brianna had not been certified dead, and no corpse had been found, therefore the case remained a missing persons investigation rather than a homicide or criminal trial. As a result, the charges against Key were eventually dismissed. This is what we in the business call asterisk motivation. However, Greg Overacker does not believe Key, often spelled Kali, in sources, is to blame. While his account does not explicitly name a suspect, he claims to know who kidnapped Brianna and that their identity is revealed later in the book. Now, while I don't have as much insider information as Overacker, I disagree with his dismissing of Key's likely involvement. It's comparable to how I disagreed with Lou Smith's reasoning in the JonBenet Ramsey case, specifically his claim that parents don't do that to their children. According to Overacker, the idea that Key went from a couple of punches to murder was impossible since it would imply going from a little attack to an act that may land her in prison for life. But I don't think that explanation is very convincing. Overacker's first point in Key's defense is that, despite the incident, she and Brianna were good friends. He admits that many of their mutual acquaintances were upset with Brianna, but the vast majority also stated that they still loved her and that the matter would work itself out. Key also reportedly gave unusually candid answers during police interrogations throughout the years, acknowledging the fight while also claiming unequivocally that she would have fought Brianna again under the identical conditions. While this appears to be honesty, it also shows a lack of remorse. According to Overacker, Key was later imprisoned for serious offenses in 2012 and 2013. In the 2012 case, she participated in a house invasion in Berkshire. Investigators believe Key LaCrosse was part of a group that broke into Samantha Thompson's home. During a confrontation with Dustin Burns, Key allegedly bit Thompson on the leg. She was detained for burglary and simple assault. That does not exactly ooze self-control. What sticks out even more is who else was wanted by police in connection with the incident. A man named Trevor LaCrosse, who, based on his age, was probably certainly Key's brother or cousin. This indicates that two known violent criminals from the same family have committed many offenses. Brianna's close friend, Shauna LaBelle, also gives valuable information after driving her to the police station to report the assault. In an episode of Asterisk Disappeared on Investigation Discovery, Shauna revealed that after Brianna left, she asked Key what would happen to the assault report. Key allegedly said smugly, well, nothing's going to happen, because Bree's not around right now. That is not only cold, it is chilling. Given the aggressive pattern of behavior, lack of regret, and disrespectful remarks allegedly directed toward Brianna's friend, it's difficult not to believe Key might have received more forgiveness than she earned. Just as some investigators hesitate to think parents could be culpable for crimes against their own children, Greg Overacker seems unwilling to consider that young women can likewise be capable of significant violence, or of coordinating it. History has proven, however, that they can, particularly in cases involving drugs, jealousy, or unstable relationships. Overacker said Key Lacrosse displayed little to no regret for the attack on Brianna. Her record points to her being not unfamiliar with violence. Brianna's boyfriend at the time, James, also raised concerns. Though he lived close to her, he did not search for Brianna after she vanished. This is the same James allegedly there when Key confronted Brianna regarding a love relationship just days ago. He could have been feeling deceived or enraged. Their relationship was already strained. They had broken up and gotten back together within weeks of a fight on Valentine's Day. His behavior, too, raises red flags. His answers to police altered more than occasions, particularly regarding when and how he observed Brianna's abandoned car. Initially, he stated he was returning from Canada when he observed the truck around 4:30 a.m. Later, he revised his account, stating he had been at a friend's house and observed the automobile at around 2:30 a.m. That's not a minor discrepancy. In either situation, one would expect someone who cared about her to disclose what he saw, or at least mention it to the authorities shortly afterward. His reason for staying silent? He claimed he was frightened of being detained for driving under the influence. At best, it's an unusual explanation. At worst, it's suspicious. The shifts in his timeline, from a later hour farther away to an earlier hour much closer, only invite additional examination. Why alter the story unless there's anything to hide? Of course, it's possible that the Vermont State Police know more than the public. They may have ruled specific persons out for reasons they haven't acknowledged. But that doesn't mean there weren't important blunders along the way. A new lead soon emerged, one that tied into the local party scene and the expanding drug culture in the area. Two identities surfaced, Raymond Ryans and Nick Jackson, both notorious drug dealers. They were linked to the case after an anonymous lady called Brianna's father, Bruce Maitland, claiming she knew where Brianna was. By mid-April, tensions between the Maitland family and law authorities had increased. The Vermont State Police had made public remarks implying Brianna might have run away, been involved in drug trafficking, or owing a debt, without giving evidence for any of it. Her folks were understandably angry. So when Bruce received the anonymous call, he acted. He informed the police and made it clear, if they didn't respond to the tip, he would. He and a friend were prepared to travel to the address personally. He handed law enforcement an ultimatum: they had 1 hour to act. Whether due to the pressure or the strength of the lead, officials mobilized. A team comprising of state troopers, fish and wildlife officials, and border patrol agents searched a property on Reservoir Road, as reported by the informant. They did not find Brianna or the purported root cellar where she was allegedly being held. But they did find Ryans, then 28, and Jackson, 26, in the company of a 17-year-old girl called Stephanie Macchia. In plain sight, cocaine, marijuana, guns, and drug paraphernalia. Though both men denied any knowledge of Brianna's whereabouts, they were detained on drug and guns charges. But what may have been a turning point in the investigation instead ended with disappointment. Both were released without bond and continued their activities, just in a different place. Later that year, Ryans abandoned the state and returned to New York. Vermont's fugitive task force stated they couldn't locate him. So Bruce turned to the U.S. Marshals, who promptly hunted Ryans down and extradited him back to Vermont. And what occurred next was nearly astounding. Raymond Ryans was ultimately offered a plea deal in exchange for information about Brianna Maitland's abduction. Despite contributing nothing of value, he received an extraordinarily short sentence, 18 months, with all but 45 days suspended. Those 45 days are counted as time served. He was released. It did not stop there. Ryans was then offered a polygraph test, with the promise that if he passed, all other claims would be removed. According to investigator Greg Overacker, Ryans either passed or the results were inconclusive. In any case, the accusations were dismissed. Overacker constantly underlines in his book that he thinks the Vermont State Police did their best. But if this was their finest attempt, it's tough to conceive what a lesser answer may be like. Ryan's and his girlfriend, Lucia Collins, reportedly peddled crack cocaine independently in Burlington. Collins was brutally killed by a woman named Ellen Duchamp, bringing an end to their union. Duchamp thereafter became a person of interest in Brianna's case. She initially denied knowing anything about Brianna, but later changed her story, claiming she knew her and suspected Ryan's was responsible for her death. However, her credibility was severely harmed. Duchamp had been involved in a homicide committed during a multi-day crack and alcohol binge. Her lover later assisted in hiding the body. Despite police efforts to link Ryan's to Brianna using this lead, no evidence was found to support the claim. Nick Jackson, Ryan's associate, was also identified again, this time by an ex-girlfriend accusing him of involvement. Her allegations, like Ryan's, were unsupported by any particular evidence. The Duchamp story was great, but Overacker believed it lacked depth. Her shifting narrative and long-standing instability made it untrustworthy. It was one of several unsubstantiated reports in the case. Ryan was not the only one who received notice. Another possibility emerged: George, the Joker, Soto, who had been released from prison just 3 days before Brianna went missing. Shortly after his release, Soto began telling people that he had murdered her and buried her body in a cornfield near St. Alban. Police interviewed him after rumors spread. However, Soto was quickly removed. He was notorious for making false claims and attempting to appear menacing. Overacker found no evidence that Soto and Brianna had ever met. He was jailed in New Jersey from 1999 to March 16, 2004. Brianna was with friends on the 17th and 18th, and with her mother and at work on the 19th, the day she disappeared. Their paths did not cross. Other identities surfaced during the investigation, but none went somewhere significant. Timothy Cruz, a suspect in the Duchamp homicide, was among them. Duchamp claimed Cruz assisted Ryan's in killing Collins, but this was impossible because Cruz had been in jail since early March 2004. Several well-known offenders were mentioned in tips, including Israel Keys, Gerald Montgomery, Brian Rooney, and Howard Godfrey. While all had a history of violent behavior, no evidence linked them to Brianna's disappearance. The FBI confirmed that Keys was not in the area at the time, despite the fact that the Vermont State Police did not request their assistance. Similarly, Montgomery, Rooney, and Godfrey had no verifiable involvement in the case other than supposition. Even years later, tips continued to arrive. One theory suggested that Brianna might still be alive. In 2006, George Soto said she was trafficked to New Jersey. Though not a credible source, his report coincided with an intriguing development. A Vermont man visiting Atlantic City said he saw Brianna at a casino. Security footage showed a young woman who resembled her. She would have been 19 at the time. Brianna Maitland's parents remained skeptical after reviewing CCTV footage from the Atlantic City casino. The woman appeared to be playing cards comfortably at a table, not under stress. Brianna's photos were given to casino employees, who did not recognize her, and the footage, which was broadcast throughout the Northeast, produced no new leads. Even if the woman on the video was Brianna, it raised more questions than it answered. How did she get there? And what exactly happened the night she vanished? There are several theories regarding her disappearance. Brianna's car was found driven backward into an abandoned house on the eastbound side of Vermont Route 118, facing west. The vehicle's headlights were turned on, and the driver and passenger side doors were open. Her keys were missing. A coffee cup, some spare change, a broken necklace, and a squeezed lime wedge resting on the trunk were scattered over the vehicle's exterior. Inside the car, authorities discovered 2 uncashed paychecks and Brianna's wallet. This scene has spawned numerous hypotheses. One scenario that investigator Greg Overacker rejects, and I agree with, is that Brianna left voluntarily. That theory conflicts with the facts. If she had planned to flee, she would not have left behind her wallet, cashable checks, migraine medication, contact lenses, or newly purchased clothing. Brianna had taken her JADE exam and was working one of her 2 jobs on the day she disappeared. There was no indication that she meant to end her life. If she had decided to start over somewhere new, her car was the only option, but it was left behind. Creating a scenario that would cause so much distress for her family appeared out of character. According to Overacker, the runaway theory is not only impractical, but also unworthy of debate. And that seems fair. A slightly more plausible, but still weak, theory holds that Brianna never made it to the abandoned Ditchburn house at all. According to the story, she overdosed at a party that night, either by accident or because someone intentionally gave her too much of a narcotic. According to the report, her car was driven to the Ditchburn property to mislead investigators. However, this narrative contains a basic flaw. A credible witness reported seeing Brianna's car shortly after midnight, less than an hour after she left work at 11:20 p.m. In that time frame, about 40 minutes, she would have had to drive to the alleged party, which no witness has ever confirmed, overdose, and then have someone else move her car. That scenario seems logistically unlikely. Furthermore, as Overacker points out, the Ditchburn house was not the best place to hide an automobile. In rural Vermont, side roads, fields, parking lots, and old logging paths are far superior places to leave a vehicle unattended. Choosing an abandoned site with a history of attention does not align with the concept of planting evidence. Taken together, this theory lacks believability. Other alternatives appear more plausible, albeit not necessarily more likely. Some assume that someone concealed inside Brianna's car while she was at work. Following her departure, the intruder identified himself and attacked her, possibly within a mile of the Black Lantern Inn. This circumstance raises various challenges. Subduing someone in a moving vehicle would be dangerous, especially if the offender was acting alone. According to Overacker, for such an abduction to be successful, a second person would be needed, one to jail Brianna and another to handle car logistics. This would necessitate leaving a second vehicle at or near the Ditchburn house and walking a mile and a half to the inn, or deploying an accomplice to arrange transportation. However, one detail that Overacker overlooks could make this scenario more plausible: the invader may have had a firearm. The existence of a firearm may have allowed a single attacker to exert control over the situation without engaging in a physical struggle, lending credence to the theory. While Overacker believes Brianna stopped by the abandoned Ditchburn house to meet someone, I'm not convinced that's the most probable reason. His rationale is sound, and I make no claim to have his level of knowledge, but based on the evidence, I believe another explanation is more feasible. According to Overacker, Brianna may have purposefully pulled off the road to sit in the grassy area near the old farmhouse, possibly to meet someone she knew. Something then went wrong, whether it was a deliberate confrontation or an unintended escalation. In an attempt to flee, she may have thrown her car into reverse too quickly, losing control and colliding into the side of the house. She was then removed from the vehicle and taken somewhere else, possibly because she was stranded or panicked, never to be seen again. That theory is very conceivable. It is not based on insane assumptions, and it is compatible with Brianna's known lifestyle. She was a recreational drug user, and she may have been set up by someone she trusted. What disturbs me is the lack of supervision in many teenagers' lives in that region. Law enforcement was overwhelmed, and the drug trade operated dangerously in places such as schools and movie theaters. It is simple to imagine a young woman like Brianna getting involved in anything dangerous. Still, I can't shake the impression that meeting someone in a rundown, remote location contradicts what we know about her. Brianna may have made questionable judgments, but she was not irresponsible. Accepting to meet someone in such a vulnerable state appears out of character. That is why I believe another option is more compelling. Brianna began working at the Black Lantern Inn on March 5, covering late-night Friday shifts. Her journey from Sheldon to Montgomery followed a single, predictable course. On the night of March 19, she left work normally. As she approached the bend where the Ditchburn residence is located, a vehicle abruptly drove off Ditchburn Farm Road, cutting her off. Brianna may have panicked when she was forced off the road and into the grass. Knowing that her old Oldsmobile couldn't outrun anyone, she attempted to turn around and head east to the safety of her office. During the chaos, she overcorrected, pushed the gas too hard, and collided with the side of the Ditchburn house. Before she could recover and drive away, the occupants of the second vehicle approached on all sides. They pulled her out of the car while she protested. During the struggle, her coffee cup was knocked over, her necklace snapped, and spare change tumbled to the ground. She might have managed to pocket her keys before being grabbed and pushed into their automobile. One of the attackers fled with Brianna, most likely heading north toward the weekly patrolled Quebec border. The other remained behind to deal with her car, but could not locate the keys. With no way to move the vehicle, he waited for the driver to return. Finally, they decided to leave the car as it was, closing the doors and turning out the lights to make it appear abandoned. Just another victim of the local drug trade. Whether this is true or not, one question remains: who was responsible? Overacker names many people in his book, the majority of whom he rejects as suspects: Timothy Cruz, George Soto, Moses Robar, Israel Keys, Brian Rooney, Jose Rodriguez, Gerald Montgomery, Peter Jones, and Howard Godfrey, among others. However, three names remain: Raymond Ryans, Nathaniel Jackson, and Brianna's ex-boyfriend, James. James went to Brianna's car that night, shut off the lights, and closed the doors but never notified the police or her family and gave inconsistent accounts. Overacker feels the perpetrator was likely a stranger but still considers Ryan a possibility. Given Ryan's history, ties to the drug trade, and closeness to critical events, this explanation looks likely. However, a twist develops. In a March 2024 True Crime Pie podcast, Overacker said he now believes Brian Rooney is responsible for Brianna's disappearance and potentially Maura Murray's. Subtle signs in the hunt for Brianna Maitland reflect Overacker's developing perspective, yet he concedes no concrete evidence links Rooney to Brianna. Overacker eventually amended his opinion, believing Rooney purposefully ran Brianna off the road rather than her meeting someone at the Ditchburn residence. While Overacker's views are significant, it's too early to disregard the involvement of Brianna's tight group. Carly Lacrosse's violent attack on Brianna and lack of contrition, together with James' suspicious actions, create worries. Emotional stress, betrayal, and possibly drug involvement could have worsened the event. Feedback from the audience is vital to enhance the inquiry and identify the truth. Sharing and engaging with the case could bring us closer to answers.